As I'm joined today by one of the best voices in the game, man. One of the guys that has all the knowledge, drops all the truths. You know, sometimes people like it, sometimes people don't, but that's the business we live in. Correct, my man? Luke Thomas, thank you so much for joining the show, and I appreciate it, man. Last time we had you on, about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less. You know, we had you on. We both had dance partners. And since then, we both lost our dance partners. So I lost Big John, and as of yesterday, you lost, BC. So give me a little take on, what's going on, and how's that going?
Well, as you indicated, first of all, thank you for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. What I would say is, as you probably heard, as many people have probably heard at this point, Morning Combat is something I've been doing since roughly July of 2019. It's been through many different iterations. It was initially just a Showtime project. Then it was a dual Showtime CBS Sports project. And then it became essentially when Showtime Sports went away, most of the people who worked on that all formed a new company called All the Smoke, and MK Morning Combat has been with All the Smoke essentially all that time and still is. Mm-hmm. But as you indicated, BC, who was part of it since literally day one, has now returned back to CBS full time. Now, he's always been with CBS full time, but I think obviously folks can look around and be like, things have changed because they've got the new UFC Paramount deal. And I think, the way I would explain it to people is, to the best I understand it, it's like an all hands on deck kind of moment over there, right? Where people are going to be busy, I think is a good way to describe it. So he had to make a decision and he went there. What I would say is, I'm not sure when this podcast will come out, so I have to be very, very careful. I think what I would say is, I can't spoil it. There are announcements coming very, very soon. And I know it's already, midweek essentially. And folks are like, okay, well, what's it going to be? What I can say is what I can repeat from last Monday. Namely, normally we do Monday and Friday. Yeah. There'll be no Friday show this week. And obviously you're like, well, then where does that leave Monday? You'll just have to tune in to find out, is what I would say.
Got it. I mean, like, I found that it's a little bit more difficult to do these shows by yourself, and you're always trying to find someone to kind of like host with you and jump on board with you a little bit, because part of this sport is about bouncing ideas off of each other. Like, when you're covering sports, right? That's why they have a desk, in between at halftime. That's why they go to the desk in between fights, at the UFC or when it was with Bellator or Strike Force, whatever it was. Because you want to bounce ideas off and give perspective on everyone's take. It's hard to do it. And so I've been having a little bit of a bounce around right now, making sure that I'm filling my time with my interviews, but, having you on right now. And then also too, I did DC last week on Christmas Eve when I was in.
Oh, I did see that. Yep. Yeah. I did see that.
It was just good to catch up with him, man. I hadn't seen him in 6-7 years in person, I think.
Wow.
And it's been a long time. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a while. I saw.
Do you still live in the Bay Area or Northern California? Like, where do you live?
No, I'm in North Dallas.
Dallas?
So I moved to Dallas about 2 years ago.
How's Dallas?
It's been nice. It's 75 degrees today in early January. I'm not complaining. Now, it's not always like this, but it's beautiful. And honestly, I live out more in the cuts. I don't live in Dallas, the city. I don't live in proper. So it's more like I'm more country. So, we've got a small community that we're living in, and I would say there's only about 80,000 people in our community.
Wow.
So it's nice. It's definitely a lot slower pace from San Jose and that lifestyle. And, but I still have businesses and gyms that I run out in the Bay Area, but I'm here full time now. So my kids are here in school, my wife's here and family's here, and everything is good, man. I'm really enjoying this moment because I said when I got done fighting, like I waited to the end of my career to have kids. I just said, like, I'm not having any kids until I'm almost done. So then now that my kids have gotten a little bit older, now there's more sports involved. I said I need to get away from the Bay Area because the Bay Area will suck you in, and I can consume myself with so many things that have nothing to do with my family. Yeah. And I never wanted to be that kind of father. And so my whole focus is really like spending every second I possibly can with my kids, taking them to practices, doing everything. So
I get it. I mean, I only have one kid, but when they tell you it goes fast, man, they mean it. They mean it. Like, yeah. It's been weird because I was the last of all of my siblings, so I didn't have a younger sibling to watch grow up, and I did not have a big family growing up either. So for me, watching my child grow is almost like the first time I've actually watched it. It's kind of beginning to, to where it is now. And it's like that. And being in a place that you can both mentally and then quite literally physically, the geographic location that you can be in to commit to that is like critically important, which I'm sure you know. Also, getting back to the point about like having a co-host, I mean, it's real. The one difference for me though is that I've actually spent the majority of my time as a broadcaster
Mhm.
doing it for the most part pretty solo. Um, so I did MK for a long time, but I used to do 15 hours of radio a week with Sirius XM solo.
Oof.
Like basically, I mean, we'd have guests on for 15 minutes or whatever, but you got commercial breaks. So you've got like a little window to have a chat with someone and then they're gone. And then it's just you. I do that for 15 hours a week. I did that for 4 or 5 years. And then I also do my live chat solo. So I've got a little bit more practice with it. But I can certainly sympathize and to a degree, obviously empathize as well, that like when you've got chemistry with somebody and then that gets taken away, replacing that is not so simple. It can look so, oh, just put someone else in there.
No.
It doesn't always, even if you're good and even if they're good, that doesn't mean you're good. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain kind of glue that has to happen naturally that that can be hard to find.
Yeah, I probably had close to 25, 30 people reach out to me like, "Hey man, if you're looking for a co-host, I'm all in." I'm like,
Right.
it's just hard. Like you don't want to also rush and jump in there and be like, "Hey, everyone just jump on in." And like that's not really what I was doing. And I got lucky because I had an opportunity to head out to Jersey and in that area there and get the interviews with Islam and Habib and Ali and Javier. Did it all in person. And I got lucky because Frankie Edgar and I are really good friends. He lives right down the street from my mom in Tom's River. So my mom and him live like maybe a quarter mile away from each other. And so I just stayed with my mom, and then I was able to, train over at Frankie's, be able to teach a seminar there at his new facility there. And then I'll also to swing by, where the boys are working out and get a chance to like do the interviews with them. So it was a great opportunity to catch up with everyone that I hadn't seen. I see Habib and I see Islam. I see them in passing when I was working for Bellator, but we never had an opportunity to like really hang out, And so this was an opportunity for me to like to come by the house, hang out with them, have food with them. We went to a sauna bar at the end, where you just cut weight, to help Islam. It was like, basically the week before he was cutting a little bit of weight, just kind of keeping his weight down. And we spent probably 4 or 5 hours at the sauna bar, getting food, then sauning, and then getting more food, and then sauning. Like, so it was a good time with some cold plunge and just great conversation. I couldn't understand half the shit because it was all in Russian. But, Habib did a great job and Islam did a great job of translating for me, but it was fun, man. We had a good time catching up. AKA has a really good family atmosphere and we see each other, but we don't see each other because all of us are so busy in our own lives. And you know how that goes.
How much overlap did the end of your career, or even any part of your career, have with the Russian guys coming over to AKA? How much time was there?
Oh, 10 years.
Oh shit! So a long time then.
I mean,
okay.
it was, yeah. I mean, Habib came in like 20, I want to say almost when the UFC merged with Strikeforce. So 2010, 2012, somewhere. I think 2012, 2013 is when he came, and then Islam came shortly after, and then Umar came shortly after, and Abu Bakr was there. And like they had a good little small group. Islam Mamedov was there. Mamedov, Islam, Makhachev, and Habib were my 3 training partners. My fight leading into to the Nate fight, I used Habib, I used Islam Mamedov for some of that training, and yeah, man. Like, and then
that
I
was
used
your
them
head.
all.
You head kick KO'd him for that one, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, the Nate fight. Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask you, like, 'cause this is something people ask me all the time, and I feel like people sleep on this. If you count yourself, Strikeforce champion, right? Luke Rockhold, Strikeforce champion, UFC champion. DC, I guess he had the Strikeforce Grand Prix title, but then obviously 2-weight world champion in UFC. There's Frank Shamrock before that. There is Javier himself. And then there are all the Russian guys as well. It's like AKA's claim to being, at a bare minimum, the most decorated gym in MMA history. Now, I know ATT's up there. There's some other great gyms, but AKA stands kind of alone. I mean, the fact that Fitch and Koscheck were there and didn't get titles, and look how fucking good they were, kind of speaks to like just how much insane talent has run through that gym. When people ask you, I mean, I'm obviously you're biased, but I would just love to hear your perspective about how you answered that question about whether AKA is the best gym in MMA history.
Honestly, it's so hard for me to say yes, it is, but I'm gonna say yes because I am biased. But it just comes down to, you gotta remember, like Militich had the whole crew. Like basically every title was held up by Militich's camp for a while, right? They had Tim Sylvia, they had Pat Militich, and then Matt Hughes took his spot. Who else was around? There was other guys that were, they just filled in
Jens
so many.
Pulver.
Jens Pulver. I mean, like they had a great group of guys as well. So, and they were the first ones to do it, which maybe was easier to do it back then. I don't know. But bottom line is they had a great group. And then Greg Jackson, he had a slew of guys, right? To the point where they had to fight each other. And there was, I think for me, the reason why I say we were the best gym was because even to this day, our guys decided not to fight each other. That was one. And two is they didn't care what the UFC said. They said, no, we're not fighting each other. If it comes, it comes. But like we're not gonna let it get to that. And Koscheck and Fitch had to stand on business, and it almost cost Fitch his career because they didn't like Fitch, they liked Koss, and so it almost cost him his career. Were doing anything they could to get John Fitch out of there, and so Cain Velasquez in DC had to go to 205 because there was already talk like, hey man, we can't keep having you beat all of our number one contenders. Cain is at the top, and DC's like, I'm not fighting Cain. Smart call, very smart, but it was one of those positions where we had guys that were in the same weight class. I was training with Gray Maynard, Tyson Griffin, Khabib, Islam Mamedov, all at the same time. They were all in my gym at the same time when I fought Nate Diaz. And I had Leo Vieira, jiu-jitsu master.
Legend,
yeah, legend. Lucas Leitch was coming in to train. Lapella was coming in to train. Marcus Buchecha was coming in to train. We had just a great camp at that moment. That was the best we were ever going to be. Really was.
It's really
it was awesome.
It's just a remarkable amount of Hall of Famers and elite guys who went through there. So how do you answer the question of like, it's something I've wondered too. Now, different sport, different nationality, different culture, but just let me introduce it and see what you think of it. In kickboxing, teammates will fight each other, right? Especially the Dutch guys. The Dutch guys just kind of let it rock. And I don't know what that does to team chemistry. I don't know what that does to gym politics. I obviously have no clue, right? So how do you feel about like what you guys did as a successful formula versus like somehow the Dutch guys seem to just get around it? I'm not sure how you would describe it.
So it would be hard for me to describe how the Dutch is because I don't know like what their culture is inside a gym, not to mention just their culture in their country. Like, is it okay just to fight your friend? I mean, here, to me, it's always been about loyalty. I'm very loyal to my friends. Habib was very upset with me. I'll give you this little caveat here: is Habib was upset with me when I had Conor McGregor on our show, and he didn't talk to me for a while. And I had to reach out to him like, "Hey, you haven't returned my call." We ran into. He's like, "Brother," he's like, "It really upset me that you had him on," and I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know this. I didn't. He never talked to me about it until I had to approach him." So loyalty is a huge thing, and I've always been a very loyal person. I didn't think he'd be offended by it because I was like, you beat his face in. Like, what is there to talk about? Like you destroyed him. Like, so I didn't think he'd be mad, but he was upset. And as I look back, I'm like, I understand now. He said all these things about your father. He said all these things about you and your religion and your culture and your family and your wife and everything. And I wrapped my head around that. I was like, all right, cool. I understand exactly where you're coming from now. And our gym has been very connected. Like, we just choose not to want to fight each other. In terms of Dutch culture, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's okay. I couldn't speak on that. Yeah. I know that other gyms, guys like at American Top Team, right? Like Robbie Lawler and T Wood fought. Like Robbie left the gym after he lost because they took his thing down, apparently. His picture of him up and put Woodley's up. And I think that bothered him. And he left. He ended up going to Killcliff. He's there now. He's been there ever since. Killcliff is dealing with that on a daily basis, is because they're all managed by different people. They have one coach, and the coach is like, look, I'll train you guys. I'll have separate times for you guys to hit pads and hit mitts. And they have a couple coaches that work individually with some guys, and it's working for them. But there has been some animosity between fighters, like, the Kamaru Usman and Ian Gary situation. Ian left. Shavkat is there now too with Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman's in and out, kind of with Trevor Whitman in Colorado, but he's also coming into Killcliff, occasionally, and he's there quite a bit. I think on his off training camps, he's there. But they have to navigate through that. That's not something AK ever wanted. Like, let me give you an example. We had John Fitch, Josh Koscheck, Mike Swick, all at 170. I was in the process of, Anthony Johnson had asked me to manage him. And I was like, I can't manage you. I've got too much on my mind, on my own camp. But he came into AKA. He wanted to train at AKA. And I said, look, we have to. I got him in the UFC. I'm the reason why Anthony Johnson ever got in the UFC. And he'll tell you, he said it on this podcast. But he literally it came to a point where they're like, no, we have too many 170 pounders. We can't. And sadly, I wish he would have stayed because he ended up being a 205 pounder, eventually. But we had to turn fighters like him away because they're like, no, the UFC's already given us a hard time about Fitch won't fight Swick and Swick won't fight Koss, and nobody wants to fight each other. And they're like, no, we can't do this. So it did there was some things. They asked me to fight Gray Maynard and I said no. And, Gray, and then Habib was asked with Ariel Helwani, and we were doing an interview after I cornered him for one of his fights against Pat Healy. So would you fight Josh? He's like, nah, brother, I wouldn't fight him. And I'm like, okay, that answered the question. And to be honest, those hypotheticals in the beginning, all it does is stir the pot. Because let me just tell you how it all broke down. Gray Maynard was ranked 1 ahead of me. He was 2, I was 3. Habib was I think just barely got into the rankings after he beat Pat Healy. I think he was like number 11 or 12 or 10 or something like that. Bottom line is, I lost, Gray lost, Habib runs on and becomes champion. So what's the point of asking all those questions? I know that the media needs to get some controversy going and they want to ask them, but in reality, so many things need to fall into place for us to have to fight each other. It just so happened that like Koscheck and Fitch were there at the top at the same time and beating everybody at the same time and making it look easy, to be honest. So in our gym, we never really even considered fighting each other. I was of the notion though that my own personal is if I ever did become UFC champion, any of my teammates, if they were next in line, I would fight them. And the reason why I would fight them is because that's life-changing money. And I'm not there to take away my friends' money. That's how they feed their kids. Why would I have you fight for less money, knowing that you could beat me if you could beat me? A fight is a fight. Like, I've got to be able to beat the best guys. You're the best guy. You're my teammate. I would rather lose it to you knowing you're taking care of your family. That's how I always looked at it. But guys like Khabib are like, no, I'm not fighting my friend. I'm not going to do that. And I respect that and appreciate that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are things that I couldn't comment on in any kind of way intelligently, except to say, if you're wondering... If you're wondering why the media asks, like, even when they know the answer, there's 2 reasons for that. One is that in MMA, what I have found over time is that if you just keep asking, eventually you are going to get a different answer, and it may take years. Yeah. It literally might take years, but eventually, like, oh, if I finally happens. And then 2 is that you like, for example, let's say there's an interview with, I don't know, make something up, Ilya Taporia, right? Just something. And you ask him something and you get a no for it. If MMA Junkie asked it, it doesn't matter because now it's your turn to ask and your editor is going to be like, I don't care that they asked. You need to ask on the record for this interview for this time so we can get an answer for it because this might be the time that the answer is different. So like these competitive kind of weird information pressures that, by the time it makes it to the fighter's doorstep, they get sick of it,
That sounds like my wife. She'll ask me the same question 15 different ways. So she gets the answer she wants. Yeah. I understand, like, when you finally get the answer you want, we're the company that got it. Like, we're the media source that was able to pull that. Then everyone's got to pull from your question. So I understand that. I do understand that. But I mean, have you thought about moving forward, like on what's going to happen with you? And is Morning Combat still going?
Yes. I mean, the problem is I would love to be able to tell you everything. No. I cannot. There is a plan. There's been a plan for, I mean, I would say this, like, when I forget exactly when it was. So, okay. We knew for a while that the UFC's deal with ESPN was going to be up, obviously at the end of this year, and that they were talking to basically 2 different parties simultaneously. One was ESPN itself for renewal, and then the other one was Netflix. And that we what I had heard through the vast majority of the time that deal was being discussed, the next television deal, was that there was a bit of a problem the UFC was facing, which was that Netflix didn't want any old inventory. Netflix basically wanted the premier end of the product and nothing else. And you could do that. You could give, let's say, the 13 numbered events, which is what they're going to call them, formerly pay-per-views, to Netflix. But then what do you do with your fight nights? What do you do with your Apex cards? What do you do with that kind of stuff? Would ESPN want that kind of a thing now that you pulled out the premier end of the product? And so this was kind of the negotiating that was happening between the two parties. And then this Skydance Paramount merger kind of got approved pretty quickly. And then all of a sudden they wanted to just come and make a splash. And then they signed this huge monster deal with the UFC. I had a feeling once that happened, because I thought, again, it was just going to be ESPN and some combination of the two between that and Netflix. And when that happened, I was like, you know what? They might call him back, just because of how much money they're spending for those rights. They're going to want stuff for that, right? I mean, they're not just going to give him money and be like, do whatever you want, you know? And so he didn't say anything at the time, but, it wasn't too long necessarily after that we kind of got an inkling something was coming. So we put a plan into action right away. And it took, I don't know how to explain this. It took a lot of different, it felt like I was doing one of those American Ninja Warrior obstacles to kind of get to the next place, but we did. So listen, and I'll tell you the truth, and this is something I'll repeat probably on next Monday's show. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if my ideas are good, and it's not all just my ideas, it's the ideas of the team too. I have no idea. I have no clue.
Are you with DraftKings on this too?
DraftKings was, yes, that's still be a part of it. That's right.
Okay.
And it's still all the smoke. So basically it's literally just BC leaving, and then there'll be some incoming parts. I'm just going to do the best job that I can with the opportunity that I have, and I hope that people will like it. I don't know what else I can do, to be honest with you.
Look, I really enjoy your show. You and I, we are vastly different on our political views, but that doesn't mean that a lot of people have a tendency to just shy away or just like talk down on people that don't agree with them politically. Me and you, though, like I have utmost respect for you when it comes to your actual breakdown of knowledge and fights. And I have no idea whether you trained or not. I have no idea if you trained jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or any of those things. But I do appreciate your perspective on breakdown of fights. I do appreciate the way you go in depth on things that I just like verbally, I have a hard time doing. Like I have a hard time communicating. Maybe it's the CTE that kicks in. I don't know, but I do enjoy your show. I do enjoy your guys' conversation, especially with you and BC, because you guys made it fun, man. You guys made it fun.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I used to train for a while. I mean, a long while. But now I'm old. I mean, I can't remember the last time I trained. What was it, 2018?
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's been a long time,
Yeah, I'll get it in probably 3-4 times a month,
Still?
But I do the old dad training, though. We go 5 a.m. and I try to get home by 6:30 so I can take my kids to school.
You do the morning classes?
Yeah, I know. Those are the worst, too.
Those
I
are
hate
fucking
those.
hard, bro. How do you do that?
I'm a like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, or a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock trainer. But my kids I'm too involved that time. And 1 o'clock, here we are, it's the middle of the day. I got things to do. So that morning session is the best session I can get. So I'll go on a run sometimes and do like 3 in a week, for say 2 or 3 weeks. And then my body goes, okay, you need a break.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
how old are you now?
I'm 48.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not much younger than you. I'm about a year.
Yeah.
I'll be 47 in August. So I mean, I'm not much younger. I'm also not a professional athlete either. I mean,
no, I don't look like one anymore, man. Maybe the smile's got you all fooled, but I got the dad bod in full swing, so I'm enjoying it.
You have to buy a new set of jeans. They got a little big.
a little big. Yeah. What it is the they're a little tight. They're a little tighter and snug. I mean, they're still there, but I did have to buy some sweats that were a little looser though. But yeah, we were talking, I think, a little bit about the CBS, because of the BC thing. But ultimately, like, you were very opinionated on fighter pay for a long time. And I remember watching a show where you said, I give up. I'm not talking about this anymore. I'm done. The fighters don't care. I don't care. Like, it's not, I think we've come to like, for me as a former fighter, it's not that we don't care. Is it, what are you going to do? Like, you have to band them together. And I'll give you an example. Is you're never going to be able to do it. And the reason why you're never going to be able to band these athletes together, because it's an individual sport. That being one. And two is, the example I'm going to give you is I was fighting Clay Guida in Strikeforce. Sprawl was paying me $15,000 to wear their shorts. They went to Clay. Clay reached out to them and said, "Hey, I want to, like, you guys want to sponsor me?" And they said, "Look, we don't have a lot of money." He's like, "I'll do it. I'll do it for you. Do my banner and you just give all my team shorts." That's what the difference is. Fighters undervalue themselves on a daily basis. It doesn't matter what it is, just so they can get the deal. And I understand, like, times are tough sometimes. You need, 1,000, 2,000 here and there. But he did it for nothing. They called me and tried to restructure my contract the week of the fight. They're like, all he wants is the banner. All he wants is shorts and t-shirts for his. And I'm like, that was not our deal. Nuh-uh. So I never worked with them again after that. It's like they were trying to basically, they tried to hit up all the lower level guys and be like, hey, let's win. I mean, he went on to win the fight, but it was one of those things that put me, that made me wrap my head around the fact that these fighters, they undervalue themselves.
Yeah.
They're okay with allowing the UFC to dictate how much they make. And I'm not saying we're going to go out there and ask for billions of dollars. I'm simply saying, like, the fighter pay has gone up a lot. There needs to be credit for that. I give the UFC credit because when I was fighting Yves Edwards, I was supposed to be fighting for the lightweight title. Okay. And that title fight, I made 8-8. I literally made $8,000 because I lost. I was number one ranked on all the rankings. I was number one ranked in the world. Nobody was ranked ahead of me. I lost to Yves, who was ranked number 2 at the time. Okay. Then I go on and I fight for the next 10 years, 12 years. I was in the top 10 rankings those whole times, not even being in the UFC. That says a lot. But the fighters just don't want to go out there and fight for the money. They don't want to go out there and say, like, hey, like, why don't we just dial it back a little bit and say, hey, guys, we got to come to the table. What are they getting now? What's the percentage? 16%, 17%?
Yeah, anywhere between 13 to 20, but closer to the 20 side.
Okay. I said, look, if we do it in baby steps, if we say, hey, we're not trying to get to the NBA because the NBA is suffering right now with 50-50 split or whatever the split is.
The athletes get 49% of everything.
Yeah. Okay. So the split is a little too much, I believe, and it's hurting their product. I think, for me personally, that's what I believe. Okay?
I don't think the pay is hurting their product. I think the rules are hurting their product.
I would agree with you on that as well. But I think some of the pay, knowing that these these players don't want to get injured because of their pay. Or
you mean like load management?
Yeah, load management, that's hurting their product. Like, no, I'm making money whether I play or not. No. There needs to be something written in the contract if you don't pay.
I agree with that.
Like, it's no different than, like, if we don't fight, we don't get paid.
Right.
So fighters, we have a short period of time. I think it's probably even less than the NFL players and the football and the basketball players. We have
Definitely.
a 2-year, maybe less than that span of trying to cash out at our peaks. And so it's very rare you get guys like a GSP or Islam or, guys that were able to do it for a long period of time. But my example was was Clay Guida. It was because it's so difficult to tell the guys below you, hey, take less money or go ahead and not fight right now but they need the money. Right. So what do you do with that? Like, how do you get these guys to understand, like, it's okay to sacrifice right now for the greater good later, but it's not that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is a complicated answer. And the moment I made that claim was because I was just extremely frustrated, because I also cannot tell you how many times I've had a conversation where some fighter gave to me, and it wasn't just a UFC fighter, it could be, because the reality is, contracts are pretty similar. PFL contracts, I think, are pretty similar. To Scott Coker's credit at Bellator, they actually gave, I think, something like 45% of what they made to athletes. So, like, it's actually a less relevant conversation in terms of what Bellator did. But I just can't tell you how many times they would tell me something that happened to them, and I'd be like, all right, can you in any way possible go on the record or share information about this that I can publish it? And the answer is no. They would just never do anything. And it's like, I don't know why you're telling me this then, like, what is the point of telling me if it's just to tell me? Like, I appreciate that you confided in me, but I from a professional standpoint, this is basically worthless. However, what I would say is a couple of things. I can meet the fighters halfway, certainly, on the following, which is that it cannot be easy to the point you raise. You've seen, for example, various different entities, Project Spearhead and others, excuse me, try to establish a union. And, that can be very, very difficult, given people may not trust what benefits the union could provide. They may not trust the people who are trying to actually make the union itself happen. I know for a fact there were a lot of guys, because you have to sign a card that, like, sort of pledges commitment. And that voting process is secretive, but a lot of the fighters just simply did not trust that it would be secret. And so they did not want their vote somehow being made public. And so there's just a series of obstacles that make that very difficult. More to the point, you know how it is. If you get out there as a fighter, and if let's say you're signed to the UFC or something, and you're like, oh, my contract sucks, I don't make any money, you know, there are any number of things that can happen to you that are not great. Arlovsky had some issues on his way out the first time. You know, they made him fight Jake O'Brien on the prelims. I think it was the UFC 100 card, or maybe another one, I can't remember. But you know, they tried to bury him on his way out, or you know, it creates a series of headaches that these guys simply don't want. And of course, you cannot just boycott on your own. You cannot pull a Cejudo and be like, hey, I'm out in the middle of my prime and this is going to boost my pay. No, it won't. It will not work. They'll just find another replacement for you. So there's just a series of like really, really important obstacles that make them getting to a better place structurally, right? So they don't have to go and fight for it. It just becomes the rules. Getting to that place is actually quite difficult, and I really, really understand that. But the thing I would say to people, not just fighters, everybody, which is, it is not sufficient in this life to simply say you believe something without there actually being a material act upon it. It doesn't have to be every single time. It doesn't have to be all the time. But if you spend your life saying, I believe in X, and then when it comes time to support X, you do nothing, you do not actually believe in X. You have a verbal commitment. You might have some soft or otherwise feelings for that kind of thing. It might be more agreeable to you. But belief in something, meaning this is a thing that you actually want to guide your life by, on some level, at some point, you have to act on that. And you can decide when that is, and it's a different call for everybody else. But like, understand something, my advocacy for these issues has come with real professional costs. You know, I know for a fact that certain places simply will not hire me because they have been told not to. That's a real thing, and it has impacted me significantly. I've lost out on a number of opportunities because of this, because I put my money where my mouth is. And so what I would say to someone is, it's just not sufficient to argue to someone, oh, I believe in something, if your behavior never matches it. How you negotiate the details of that is up to every individual person to decide. But it's just my belief that's how life should go.
Yeah, I did give you another little tidbit here is I was on the show Blind Date that the UFC had put together a long time ago. It was me.
Like the old school joint?
The old school, yeah. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and they knew, the UFC knew I had a girlfriend at the time. They said, we don't care, you're doing the show. And I was like, oh, but they had me. It was Tiki, Pete Spratt, Tim Sylvia, and there was one other one. It was 5 days in a row of Blind Date UFC fighters. And I do know that they offered, you know, Chuck Liddell and I have been friends for a long period of time. And Chuck goes, yeah, they asked me if I would do it. And I said no. And then he didn't get any backlash. But they told Nick Diaz that he had to do it. He's like, I'm not doing that dumb show. Nick didn't do it. And shortly after that, he ended up fighting, I think, Joe Riggs on the prelims. Like he went from knocking out Robbie Lawler to basically fighting on the prelims. And which was insane to everyone, I believe. So to believe that like the UFC doesn't hold grudges, they'll hold them. And I think Arman Sarukian right now is going through it because of that. You know, I mean, I know he dropped the ball, didn't make the weight or back issues, whatever you want to call it. But bottom line is you know, they're going to make you pay for what you cost them. Like setting up the Blind Date stuff was a huge production. You know, it was on TV. It was huge, and they ran it, and they ran it several times for years after they ran that.
Did you get any money from that?
No, of course not. They're like, no, we're helping you build your brands. No, nothing. We got nothing off of that. Yeah. So I had a girlfriend that was upset with me, but I had to explain to her. I go, there was never a moment on that show where I was alone with that girl unless the cameras are on. So as soon as the cameras turn off, they separate you. You cannot talk because they didn't want to miss anything. You couldn't talk. You couldn't be. Everything had to be filmed. Everything was.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, like there'd be conversations off the side. Then they would say, "Okay, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this," and they didn't want anything staged. They wanted it all to be legit in the way it was, and they didn't want to miss any moments. So that was the one saving grace for me with my girlfriend at the time. It's like, hey, we never. But I think you're 100% correct. The fighters have to understand that the decisions you make right now, while you're in your prime, this is the peak moment for you to make money. They're very important, because if you don't make those decisions to like dial it back and tell the UFC, I deserve a little bit more money, it's never going to get there. And at the end, when you're not worth as much, they're going to care even less. So right when you're at that peak, and every fighter that gets to the peak is like, I've worked so hard to get here. This is my moment. I understand. I feel their pain. I do. But that's why I didn't stay, or that's why I didn't go back to the UFC. I made way more money in Pride. I made way more money in Strikeforce. When I got to the UFC, they basically just renewed my contract that I had with Strikeforce for my 4 fights, and then they tried to cut me in half. They were going to pay me more money, but they wanted to pay me half and half, and I was like, I'm not doing that again.
You didn't have to do show and win at Strikeforce?
No,
just
flat fee. All flat fee. Yeah, I was all flat fee, and I mean, because my conversation with Scott Coker was always, I don't fight any less hard just because I'm getting paid half my money. I fight my ass off every single time I get in there. I'll take my licks. I got my ass kicked a couple of times. I won a bunch of times, but I always give you everything I got. And not to mention, I mean, I was one of the biggest ticket sellers in the Bay Area. I mean, I was selling probably over $150,000 worth of tickets just myself, as I was dealing tickets, like selling tickets out of the back of my car. Basically, family picking them up, friends picking them up, companies that I worked with picking them up. Like, they were buying hundreds and hundreds of tickets, through me that I had to hand deliver every single time. And it was close to 150, almost $200,000 in tickets almost every time I fought in San Jose.
Yeah, I mean, between Strikeforce and Bellator, Scott Coker's I've had disagreements with Scott, but on this particular issue on fighter pay, his record is significantly better than other promoters, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's hurt him a little bit, and I'm very grateful for him because of that, but it's hurt him a lot in terms of being able to keep these promotions going. He's built up a brand. He's built up great fighters. I mean, fighters have left the UFC to come fight for him because they've enjoyed working with him, and they know what they're going to get. Like, hey, when it comes to, you appreciate what I do inside that cage, I'm going to get paid for it. I'm going to get applauded for it, and that's what you want. You want somebody that respects what you do inside that cage, and you want to be rewarded for it. And that's what Coker did for, I think, a lot of us, and some of us that went back and fought for him. I went back to Bellator because he's like, look, I'll do the best I can. He didn't guarantee me any money. He just said, hey, I'll do the best I can. So when I talked to him about the contract, he laid it in front of me, and I said, that'll do. I didn't argue it. I didn't fight for it. I said, that'll do. That was it. I go, I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing what you do for me. That's it. And I've always been that person. With the CBS deal, what do you see in terms of pros and what do you see in terms of cons?
Man, well, already, let's talk about the pros, because there's a few already. I mean, you're in what, Central time zone now? Yeah. So, I mean, you won't feel this quite as much as we did, but I've been an East Coast guy this whole goddamn time. Bro, and I'm now almost 50.
I know where you're going with this, and I'm on your side right now. Go ahead, keep going.
Dude, when they moved the pay-per-view, or again, the numbered events, back to 9 p.m., I was like, thank you, God. Thank you. It's just 1 hour, but that's a big hour, dude.
It is.
Especially when you got kids, because people don't have kids, don't understand. So what normally happens is I do a post-fight show, and then I'm up till 2, 3, and usually I can't get asleep until 4 in the morning.
Yep.
Dude, do you think your kid cares when 7 a.m. rolls around? They're right on top, and it's time to play. And you're feeling like trash, Yeah. So any help in that regard is a big deal. That's number one. Number two, you already know what I'm about to say. Getting rid of, at least for, I guess Canadians and some other countries still have to pay for it, but here in the United States, we don't have to pay for pay-per-views anymore. I mean, this is just absolutely gigantic. I've been watching MMA since the 90s. You've been competing in it basically, or at least around it, certainly for just as long. And that this has been both a big force for revenue generation for some of these promotions, but it's been hard on the consumer's pocketbooks. To get rid of that is I feel greedy even asking for anything else, honestly, at this point. So I would say that's big. I think the thing that I think about, though, is how does this change the product? Some folks have worried, and I don't know if this will be true or not. I'm simply articulating what some people say. They're like, well, because they're not selling behind a pay-per-view, they may not make the cards as good anymore. I guess we'll see. I'm not sure how much I believe that. That's the thing we'll have to just take a look at. The thing I will say that I do think is interesting is, remember, if you're selling pay-per-views, right, in the traditional sense, the vast majority of them, some in the UK, some in Canada, but the overwhelming majority is in the United States. And so for that reason, they might put the occasional pay-per-view in Abu Dhabi because Abu Dhabi's paying them a bunch of money to go do it. But in general, you kind of have to locate it geographically where you're hosting your pay-per-view event within the United States. It's just because you have to have the local market there, and they have to be telling people about it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to have a pay-per-view in, let's say, I don't know, Costa Rica or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very, very hard to generate the kind of attention you need to do something like that. But if you're not selling pay-per-views anymore, you can just put your card anywhere. Who cares? You know what I mean? So can they take a huge title fight to Ireland? Can they take a big title fight to,
Hawaii.
I don't know, exactly, Hawaii? You name it. I don't know if it matters anymore for that. I would say though that the one kind of concern that I like legitimately have, I know I echoed somebody else's, but this is the one that I have, which is that when they were on ESPN, and ESPN kind of trailed off towards the end of this, but at least in theory, you had First Take, you had Sports Center, you had all of this programming that people on some level watched that could promote the product. CBS has some stuff like that. They have something called CBS Sports HQ, and that does pretty well for them. But they don't have the same slate of programs or really the same kind of brand visibility day to day as a news entity to promote this kind of stuff that ESPN did. And my understanding is ESPN's probably not going to cover UFC now that they're gone. It's like, it's just not going to be a thing that they touch. And so it's like, what kind of day-to-day coverage is UFC going to get with this new home? I guess we'll have to see.
Ooh, yeah, I didn't even think about that, to be honest. I just assumed that they would still put them like in their top 10 plays if it makes it there. Like if you have a great submission or a great knockout, they'll make it there. You'll get the occasional, like, if Islam was to get, to lose to somebody that he shouldn't have lost to, they'll talk about it, I think, in some of these first takes or whatever it is. I think they'll cover it in that way, but it definitely will not be something that they've made more prevalent over the years, and talking about it on a daily basis. I don't think it's going to be there. I'm not saying they left in bad terms, but it's when your girlfriend leaves, you have an ex-girlfriend now, you don't really call her on a daily basis. Hey, how you doing, hon? Like, you just don't do it. Right. So that's kind of where I was at. That I will say this, I was a West Coast guy. And when I came here and the pay-per-views were so late, I was like, how do these people do it? And I'm not even on the East Coast. I'm in the middle. I'm an hour behind you guys. I'm still struggling. And
I maintain this as somebody who visits the West Coast at times. The West Coast of the United States is the prime slot for sports, because remember the first NFL game, for example, is at 1 p.m. right on Sundays, 10 a.m. breakfast in bed, and you can watch the NFL. It's like, dude, this is peak. Someone, do you know RJ Clifford?
I've heard of him. Yeah.
So he fought in Strikeforce a while ago, but he's actually a producer of UFC now. Great guy. He was a longtime SiriusXM co-host of mine. Awesome dude. Shouts to him. And he used to make, he one time told me this, and it was just, I'd never even thought of this really. I was like, what do you guys do when the fights are over? Because they're over for you, like, around like 9:30, 10. He's like, oh yeah, we go to the bars.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. We go out.
Yeah, no, we don't. We go to bed.
No, see, so like Sunday, right? Sunday, we would go have Sunday brunch. You'd go have a bunch of mimosas and some Bloody Marys, recover from the night before watching the fight. So Sunday football at 10 a.m., we'd all be at having brunch with friends, and so like we'd watch fights late at night, get up, and then we'd film that night, or we'd go out that night after the fights, and then we'd go out to Sunday brunch on Sunday. It's beautiful. That part I do miss 100%. I miss that part of the West Coast. In terms of the pay-per-views, I just think it's great based on the fact that they're not gathering any more fans, and I think the lack of pay-per-view buys has shown that they're not gaining more fans in the States. And I think they need to do whatever they can to gather more fans here in the States. Let's be honest. There's no American fighters for them to follow.
No.
If you take a look at the brackets, and I went down with this last night, I had a conversation with my producer last night on my live show. I said, there's one or two top American fighters in the top 15, if any at all. There was one weight class that had none in the top 15. All the rest only have one, and they're like normally not even in the top 5. They're not in the top 7, 11, somewhere in that mix. So you have no American fighters. Right now, the UFC's job, and from what I'm hearing from people that work at the UFC, they're really trying to find more American fighters that they can push. And they're stepping away from signing a lot more of the Russian, Dagestan wrestler types.
You know what's interesting about this? I was thinking about this, right? And I know you and I were kind of talking a little bit ahead of today's show. it used to be okay. So people are like, oh, well, they're not going to favor this particular kind of style. Like, what does this mean for the UFC? And on one hand, what I would say is that's just always what it's been. You know what I mean? Like on one hand, right? So I'll finish the argument. So for example, you're at AKA John Fitch. Took him a while to get that GSP title shot, and it didn't help that he got whooped in that one. But it took him a long while. He beat a bunch of good guys on the way to get there, and if he had been a dynamic personality, it probably wouldn't have taken that long.
Yeah.
And I think we both know that that's true. The thing that's different for me this time is that you finally have two things. One, like there's still innovation happening all the time in MMA, but it's a little slower to me. So like styles are a little bit more kind of figured out. And also you're having like a whole like geographic territory where guys have a bunch of similar styles. Like for example, it used to be like, you go to Pride, maybe there's a lay and pray guy there, but it wasn't like a Japanese thing. Or you could go to Canada and they'll have some lay and pray guys, but it wasn't like a Canadian thing. And again, there's plenty of dynamic, on the feet, amazing Russian guys too. But as we all know, there's a lot of that wrestling, sambo, top control kind of thing happening at the same time. And it just seems like it's a little bit, and the fact that there's now a language barrier introduced, it's now you're getting a problem with the style highly concentrated around a particular kind of population where that really wasn't the case when you were a champion, or let's say late 2000s, early 2010s, or something like that. And now it's a different ball game. And how the UFC solves this problem, I think that there's going to be certain weight classes where this is going to be a little easier to figure out than others. But like independent of that problem, dude, how do you get heavyweight back? Because heavyweight isn't just bad in UFC; it's bad everywhere.
Yeah.
With the exception of like obviously Gable Steveson, he looks like he's pretty interesting. There's just a ton of problems that they have to solve around this issue.
But I had this conversation with a couple managers the other day, and bottom line is there's just not enough American fighters. They're not training anymore. There's no interest to become a fighter in the States anymore. The pay is not what it should be. Like people are like, I could go work somewhere else, have guaranteed money. It's just not the same. I can't tell you exactly what it is. But American athletes, American fighters are just they're not in the gym anymore. You go to like Kill Cliff, you go to American Top Team, there's less Americans in there than probably any other culture, or from people from other countries. There's not there. I just feel like the interest to be a fighter from America anymore is gone. It's not gone completely, but it's taken a step back.
Do you ever read, even for fighter records, do you ever read a site called Tapology?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah. So they collect data on obviously fighter records and win losses and stuff like that. But one thing that they also collect is just what is the aggregate amount of MMA shows that take place annually per country. And in places like Japan, it's actually kind of steadily going up year over year. It's not like hugely amount, but the graph looks like that. Yeah. And in Europe, certainly, I'm sure you've seen it. Europe's like having like a renaissance in the middle of this, where Spain is taking. Cristiano Ronaldo put in money into Ilia Toporia's organization called WOW in Spain, and they're off to the races. However, in the three largest, most dominant parts of the MMA market, which is Russia, Brazil, and the United States, it's declined year over year in all three of them for several years now. In fact, I think more than 5 or 6. The numbers going down. Like the sport is kind of contracting a little bit. Now, that's not me saying it's going away. That's not my point. But the boom period, unless some kind of other factor really gets involved here, is clearly behind us. And this, to me, is the central challenge that the UFC has for the next 7 years. You're going to be making a ton of money. You got to figure out a way to get that recruitment drive going to really up the ante here.
I'm extremely surprised that they haven't put more money into NIL money into college wrestling. I'm surprised they haven't been like, hey, here's a little extra cash to get you where we need to go if you're interested in fighting. Now, the problem is that we've seen a lot of these world-class or top-level national champion wrestlers go to Kill Cliff, go to ATT, come to, train with other gyms, and then all of a sudden peter out. It just wasn't for them. You know, I mean, like Jordan Oliver to me he's a great prospect. I know he's a little older in age, but man, the guy could fight. Great wrestling. He's just like, I think I'm gonna take a coaching job. I think it's all the hard work and just not a lot of money. And then when there is good money, it's like, okay, but now the fights are not consistent. Okay, you're working through injuries, or hey, like the promotion's not ready to fight you, or I got to wait 3 more months before I can fight, and I got to get into training camp. There's all these logistics, I think, that are going on right now with the sport. And it's really sad because I feel like we're at the peak now with CBS, with Paramount. To me, this is a huge deal. This is an opportunity for the fighters to make money on their own outside if they can fight on CBS. But will the fighters that wrestle, will the fighters like Khabib was talking about this? I want to see the best versus the best. They're not getting the opportunity now. Fakhretdinov 7-1 or 7-0-1 or something like that in the UFC.
6-0-1.
Yeah, released. Like it just basically didn't renew his contract. I mean, Arman's going through the beef right now. You know, and there was other fighters that were, to be honest, even with me, they were trying to re-sign me. I told them I wanted just a little bit more bump in the half and half. If I'm going to do half and half, give me a little bit more of a bump on the half and half, and I'll go ahead and do it. It was more money than my first contract if I won, but I never fought that way. I was like, no, I don't fight any less hard. I don't train any less hard. I want guaranteed money. And if you took a look at my fight against Tony Ferguson, there's no fucking quitting me. So what's the problem? Why are you not signing me? I'll fight whoever. I don't care, but I want a little bit more. And they're like, nope. And that's where we just decided to part ways. I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and test out the market. Yeah. And I left.
That NIL money, I think you're dead on. I honestly think you're dead on with that because, you know, it's great that you got Bo Nickel, who appeared to turn the corner in his last fight, and that was cool to see. But, you know, you can't count on guys like that to come in. Even under good circumstances, that's like a rare kind of find. Mm-hmm. But, man, you know how it used to be. Like those guys, not 3-time national champs, but like a Division I All-American. Dude, it used to be you swing a dead cat in the UFC and you just land on one. You know what I mean? Like they were everywhere. Certainly, you know, at 170 and down, although there was Phil Davis at 205 and there was DC and Kane and Ryan Bader and like all those fucking guys. They were all there. And even guys who weren't like that, like Josh Barnett, who is his own kind of, you know, grappling and MMA kind of wizard, like all those guys. Like, but getting back to the NIL side, it's like if you don't have that wrestler pipeline on lock, at least for the American side of the product, which, as you indicated, and I agree, certainly pretty important at this point. Like, you're just diluting the talent pool into just donks who come off the street, and those can be good sometimes, but not really. Like to me, it seems like with the wrestlers, everyone's like, oh, there's a skill set you can take to MMA. That's part of it, but also these guys have been competing for a long ass time. They've been competing, if they're Division I guys, they've been competing on big stages for a long ass time. They're hungry. Pay these fucking guys. Pay these guys money. Set them up. I'm not saying a team takedown thing where the math doesn't work, but just give them money to put them into the pipeline and then reap the rewards down the line. You got to make it in their interest to do it. And I just don't want to hear about it. Oh, well, they don't have the money. 1.1 billion a year coming into this organization. If they don't have the money now, they never will.
Well, I want to know what changed from, remember when Dana and other people that worked for the UFC used to say, if you don't like wrestling, you don't like grappling, you're a casual. And now all of a sudden, they're not signing guys that have winning records, or they're not re-signing guys that have winning records in their organization. What has changed? Like you would think they're trying to hold on to every fighter that they could because they have to deliver the goods on this CBS. They're doing 52 shows. I think what total was like, I don't know, it's some ridiculous amount of shows every year between Dana White Contender Series, the Apex shows.
So 30 fight nights total and then 13 numbered events. So 43, but that doesn't include Contender Series. That doesn't include Road to Asia. Or Road to UFC. That doesn't include any of the other stuff.
That's a ton of fights. You would think they'd be trying to keep every fighter they possibly could. Because like I've told this story a bunch of times. Joe Silva, after I was supposed to fight Anthony Pettis, and he said he was injured. Okay, I said, okay, give me anybody in the top 5. He's like, here's the list, Josh. See all the guys with the red next to their name? They're unavailable. They're either matched up or they're hurt, they're injured, surgery, married, doing something. He's like, there's no one. There was no one in the top 15. Luckily, Benson, who was getting married, said, I'll take the fight before I get married. I said, sign, I'll do it. Yeah, like that's where we live right now is people don't realize how difficult it is for them to match make because certain fighters won't take fights, certain fighters are injured, or
Mm-hmm.
they're saying they're injured because they needed whatever, they need a vacation or a break, whatever it is. And certain fighters just want to only fight the best guys. But where if you're the UFC, how can you say your fighters the best fight the best when you're letting go of guys that are undefeated in your organization? Like it's a very hard. You're not signing a
This is what
group
bothered
of
me,
people.
because this is what bothered me. It's like, look, man, if the choice was, and I was not a fighter, so obviously, you know, every fighter is going to have their own opinion, and maybe yours is the same, maybe it's not. But in terms of just my experience watching what works and what doesn't in MMA from afar, the matchmaker model, right? An organization that runs on a matchmaker model versus a tournament model, it's much better to have a matchmaker model. They need some ability to be flexible to make the, I mean, the job of a promoter, as far as I understand it, is to put on fights that people want to pay money to see. And you, as part of your DNA, you want to have the best versus the best if you're the UFC. But like, you know, these are the core kind of jobs around what they have to do. In terms of getting rid of the talent like that, getting rid of a guy like Renat Fakretinov, who was, as indicated, 6-0-1, it's very jarring to watch, because you're like, well, you know, I remember back in the UFC, and you'll remember this too. Remember, like, there was a time when, like, if you lost 3 times, they just cut you. They just cut
Yeah,
you. And now they actually don't do that. They might let you
no,
lose a bunch and then still keep you. But then the weird part is you can literally not lose, and that's also not enough. To me, that's the part that has
that's yeah.
changed, where they're a little bit more lenient depending on who you are with the losses. But if for whatever reason the wins are not, I don't know, spectacular enough, or again, you don't speak English, or you're a top control position guy, dude, that is not a ticket to anything.
Yeah.
That is just, it doesn't do you any good. It's a different ball game as a consequence. So I'm not here like recommending, oh, it's okay to lose. I don't think that's a good thing either. But there's a little bit more longevity, excuse me, it appears, in that kind of an approach versus what it used to be.
Well, I guess to kind of push this on though is how does the UFC go about taking this to the next level when they're doing things like this? Like I get like having exciting fights. Okay, they're trying to reinvent, they're trying to recreate the Conor McGregor, the Ronda Rousey era. That was their peak era. The John Jones and Daniel Cormier, like that was their peak era. I really believe when Strikeforce came over and they absorbed all these world class fighters and they were able to get it to work. How can they get this now to the next level though with the Paramount and CBS deal when they're cutting guys that are basically, like you said, 6-0-1, and fighters like Arman are not getting their title shot, knowing that he's the clear cut number one contender. I mean, there's reason to be mad at him, sure, but he's paid his dues. He came in as a backup. He's won a fight. He looked very dominant against Dan Hooker. He was told that was the number one contender spot. That person will fight, and then he got sidestepped. And I'm not taking a dig at all at Gaethje or Patty. I'm all for it. I'm looking forward to seeing that fight. But I still feel like Arman should have gotten the title shot. How do you sell to the public and the hardcores that like, okay, we're trying to get it to the next level, but then you do things like this?
So dude, I'm so glad you brought this up, because the Arman situation drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I agree. I don't know if it was a weight cut, back injury, too related, whatever. Let's just say he acted in some kind of way that wasn't in keeping with a top level professional at a key moment. It was the first pay-per-view of that year, and we can remember they're renegotiating for a new deal at that point. He didn't do him any favors. He didn't do himself any favors. Fair enough. Okay. Here's what drives me crazy. Number one, they actually won't even tell you he's in trouble. When you ask Dana White about it, what he says is, no, we're cool. There's nothing wrong. He knows what he did. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. More to the point, you'll be like, okay, well, all right, let's say he did do something wrong. What is the punishment? But then they won't even admit there's a punishment. But yet, they also won't acknowledge that he's, like, by a million miles, the number one contender. I mean, what he did, Dan Hooker is not a scrub, and Arman made him look like one. I mean, that's crazy that he was able to do that. He's a fucking physical freak.
Yeah.
Like, and by the way, speaks English. Like, this is a thing that you can, and there's a huge Armenian population in California, which I'm sure you know as well.
Absolutely.
Like, there's stuff you can do with this. and then they're sitting him on the shelf. It's like they won't commit he's in trouble, but they won't commit to his future. They won't commit to what matchmaking he has, but he does have the number one ranking contender. Like, none of it makes sense at all. And what drives me nuts is that I was there for that congressional testimony when the UFC representatives are telling Congress, hey, listen, this is a place where the best fight the best. And I wanted to be like, well, objection, because sometimes that's true, but right now it literally is not. And I'm with you. Patty versus Gaethje, whatever else you want to say about the fight, just those two guys fighting, sick fight. Love it. Yep. No problem with it. It's a great fight. I'm okay with it. It's just when Arman is sitting out there, this is a thing. But I would say this. This is one of my, and again, this is like a back of my mind concern because I think it's just too early to tell. But one thing that is on my mind, if I may say so, is that I think that Dana White is obviously got a lot of say over some things. As I understand it, like the way a broadcast looks, the way it's shown to you, all the different elements, you know, who's on it, what they're saying, this is very Dana driven as I understand it. But in terms of like how the company is structured and the broader decisions that it makes, those have been removed from him. So I'm not saying he's a figurehead, but he's not the guy that he once was several years ago. And one of the guys that has kind of stepped up as somebody who's got a lot of opinions about the company is Mark Shapiro, the COO of TKO.
Yeah.
And if you hear Mark Shapiro talk, he says shit that should make you nervous. For example, saying stuff like, oh, we can put fights on at the Apex and people don't even know if we're in another town or not because it all just looks so great. And I'm like, Mark, we can tell, buddy. We can definitely tell when you're in the Apex. Okay, that's very clear. But then the other part is, you know, he'll say things about, you know, structuring the product in a way that he's not trying to like make it the very best each time. He's trying to deliver a large slate of content all at once to someone else. And the way I kind of liken it is almost like to banquet food. If you go to a banquet, the food is not necessarily bad, but they got to make a bunch of it for a bunch of people. How good can the food be when you've got to make a bunch all at once? It can only be so good. If you really want great food, you know, the best thing to have would be like a chef cook it right for you, just like that. That's like perfectly cared, curated. And of course, that's unrealistic in most cases too. What I'm trying to say is TKO trying to treat the product like some fat slab of meat they're just trying to throw out there rather than taking the time to really make sure that they're doing the right thing for the product? If they're just trying to go for these short-term like sugar highs, does that undermine it long term? I guess, again, it's a 7-year deal. I think we're definitely going to find out.
I think it's already been proven that it undermines the deal. It undermines the growth of this sport. You want to know why? Because when they went to the Apex during COVID, when they needed to, and they continued to go on, what they stopped doing was they stopped gaining new fans in the States. They stopped gaining new fans in small cities and towns across the world. Because what they would do is they would go to Omaha, Nebraska. They would go to Nashville. They'd go to Knoxville. They'd go to Dallas or San Antonio. They'd go to areas that were the casual fan. Oh, well, there's one in my neighborhood, or there's one, they're going to be coming to my town. I can go watch. That doesn't exist anymore because they do the shows in the Apex. Now that may save them money, but in the long run, it's costing them millions and millions of dollars. Now, don't get me wrong, they're making 1.1 billion. So who am I? Right. But I think you understand what I'm saying. Like they're lacking fan base in the States because they have no American fighters. Well, no American fighters. There's probably a lack of American fighters because they don't watch it as much. That you guys don't come to the local town anymore. You're not going to Omaha, Nebraska. I keep using that because that's the one that comes to my mind. But you know, you're not going to Boise, Idaho. You're not going to Spokane, Washington. You're not going to these small towns where the hardcore fans live and are like, I want to go watch. This is my one chance. I'm going to go. They don't do that anymore. It was good to be in the Apex during COVID. They got away from it. They stayed there. Which killed it for all the hardcore fans that were young, didn't have any money. Have you tried to go to a UFC lately?
No.
It's like $3,000.
Oh, the tickets
for nosebleeds.
Are insane. Yes.
For nosebleeds. And I'm baffled because I have a friend who lives here in Dallas. He's like, I try to go to as many events as I can. He goes to like 4 or 5 a year. And I'm like, he went to Noche, the first one at the Sphere. Ridiculous. I think he paid like something like $12,000 for a ticket. It was some ridiculous amount of money. You know, it was insane. It was insane. You know, and all the other ones he goes to, he gets like the little VIP treatment, so it's an extra couple dollars or whatever it is. But regardless, um, ultimately, like I feel like they're losing their people and their fans, and they've got to find a way to build it back up. And I was hoping you'd have an answer because I don't have one.
Listen, I know this. They've got time and they've got money.
Yeah.
And you can't say that they don't know how to build an MMA brand, because they do. The only thing I'm worried about is the TKO, to your point. Hey, could we make tickets cheaper and make it for hardcore fans? We could.
Yeah.
We wouldn't make as much money doing that. Could we take a card to Omaha instead of, Las Vegas or, we could, but then we'd make less money. And I feel like there's a little bit, just too much of that happening around the product. But, maybe this cushion from Paramount will switch up some of their priorities. We'll see.
Well, hey, my man, I've taken up enough of your time. It's been a full hour. I want to thank you so much for jumping on. Hopefully we can do this more often, more dance partners if we can, when we feel this. So hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you so much for joining me, and we are out.